It was early evening in our small, quiet Pennsylvania home, the kind of cold spring day where you feel like the walls hum with silence. I was sitting at the kitchen table, bills in one hand, my reading glasses slipping down my nose, when the front door opened with a burst of cheer. Guess who got rewarded for being the rock star of the week? Laura's voice called out like a radio DJ, bright and sugary. I looked up. There she stood in her sleek office blazer, one hand on her hip, the other holding a glossy white box with a blue ribbon. She plopped it down on the table like it was a trophy. "Mason got these for me," said I crushed it at the client pitch. "Salted caramel and pistachio eclairs. You've got to try one." "Mason?" I asked, slow and careful. "Yeah, my teammate from marketing. You know Mason. Tall. Kinda loud. Likes crypto." She chuckled like we were in on a joke together. I didn't smile. She noticed. "Come on," she laughed, shaking her head. "Don't give me that look. They're just pastries. You'd think I brought home a yacht." I leaned back in my chair. "Laura, you don't see anything weird about a coworker giving you sweets? Just you?" Her expression cracked slightly. "We work closely. We nailed that meeting. It's just appreciation. Honestly, Ethan, not everything is some hidden threat to your masculinity." "It's not about masculinity," I said. "It's about boundaries." She crossed her arms. "Boundaries? You're mad over a $15 box of eclairs?" "I'm not mad," I replied, quieter now. "But I wouldn't bring home gifts from another woman and expect you to be fine with it." She scoffed. "That's because no woman's giving you eclairs." That one stung more than I let on. "Laura," I tried, but she was already on fire. "God, Ethan, you always twist things. You're stingy with attention, stingy with money, and now you're trying to be stingy with what? Recognition?" I stood up slowly. "You want to talk about stingy? I gave you a car, Laura. A brand new one, last year, for your promotion. Not to control you, but because I was proud of you." Her mouth opened slightly, and for once, no witty comeback followed. I sat back down, staring at the box. "You don't get to call me insecure when I've done nothing but support you. But this crossed a line. And the way you're defending it like it's nothing, that's what worries me." For a few seconds, silence filled the kitchen. Only the fridge buzzed in the background. Then she turned, grabbed the box, and said flatly, "Fine. I'll eat them at work tomorrow." I didn't say anything as she stormed down the hallway. Because the thing is, our life wasn't explosive. Not usually. We were that couple people called stable, suburban, reliable. We'd been married 12 years, lived in this gray two-story just outside Harrisburg. She worked in marketing, I managed a plumbing supply warehouse. We watched reruns together, shared laundry duties, went to bed around 10. But tonight, standing in the kitchen with a cold cup of tea and a box of sweets I didn't ask for, I felt something crack. And I knew deep down, eclairs weren't the problem. They were just the first sign. It was Wednesday night, a few days after the eclairs incident, and the house had that stillness it only gets when the clock creeps past normal. The TV was on, volume low, some old rerun playing just to fill the silence. But my eyes weren't on the screen. They were locked on the clock. 8:52 p.m. Laura was never this late. Not in 12 years. We weren't the kind of couple that needed to constantly check in. We both had our space, and that was part of what made us work. But this silence, this absence, it didn't sit right. I called her once around 7. No answer. Texted her at 8. All good? No reply. I didn't want to spiral. I really didn't. But the house felt off, like it was waiting for something. Then I heard her key in the door. It clicked open at 9:07 p.m., and there she was, coat unbuttoned, scarf loose around her neck, like she'd just come back from a casual stroll through the city instead of being unreachable for hours. "Oh hey," she said, brushing past me toward the kitchen. "Sorry I'm late. Mason and I were going over edits for the proposal. Took longer than we thought." "Mason again," I said quietly, standing from the couch. She turned, face already shifting into defense. "What's that supposed to mean?" I paused for a breath, made sure my voice stayed level. "It's just that, it's after 9, Laura. I didn't hear from you. I was worried." "Worried?" she scoffed, tossing her bag onto the counter. "Or jealous?" That word hung in the air longer than it should have. I blinked. "Jealous?" She crossed her arms. "You don't trust me. That's what this is." I stepped forward slowly, hands open at my sides like I was trying to reason with a wild animal. "Laura, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm not tracking your every move. I just asked why you were late. Her eyes narrowed. You don't ask when I'm 5 minutes late from the grocery store, or when I'm out with the girls. But Mason, suddenly you're checking clocks and sending all good texts like some detective. I let the silence hang before I answered. Then, gently, I said, I'm jealous because I love you. Her mouth opened, probably expecting another retort. But then she paused, and something shifted. Her shoulders lowered. Her arms dropped. And for a moment, the sharp edge in her eyes faded into something softer. I didn't mean to worry you, she said, voice quieter now. I nodded. I know. She took a step closer, brushing a hand over my arm. I do love you, Ethan. You know that, right? I want to, I said. But it's getting harder. That part slipped out before I could catch it. And I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes before she looked away. I'm going to bed, she mumbled. I watched her go. And for a second, I thought about stopping her, reaching out, pulling her back into that space we used to share so easily. But I didn't. Because something was different now. Something I couldn't name yet, but I could feel it. And as I turned off the TV and stood alone in the blue glow of the hallway light, I realized that love and doubt can live in the same house. They don't even need separate rooms. Thursday evening, the sky had that bruised color, gray sinking into purple as the sun dipped behind low office buildings. I sat in my truck, engine off, fingers wrapped around the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I told myself I was just driving, just clearing my head. But somehow I'd ended up in the parking lot outside Laura's office. The lot was mostly empty, just a few cars under dim yellow lamps, their windshields streaked from a lazy rain. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe something I could explain away later. But I stayed. And at 6:42 p.m., I saw him. Mason. Tall. Smug. With that too casual confidence some guys were like cologne. He walked out of the side entrance, laughing into his phone, one hand in his coat pocket, the other spinning his keys. I leaned forward, tracking his steps. He wasn't heading to a car. Instead, he crossed the street, headed for a cafe on the corner. No rush. Just strolling like he owned the sidewalk. I didn't think. I just opened the door and stepped out into the cool air. The bell above the cafe door jingled as he slipped inside. I followed, 2 steps behind. The place was warm, all wood and soft lighting. A few college kids hovered over laptops. Mason stood at the counter, waiting for his order, back turned. I cleared my throat. He turned and smiled. Instantly, like he'd been expecting me. Well, he said, stuffing his phone into his pocket. The husband. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, watching him. He was the kind of guy who didn't blink first. Laura's working late, I said. You? Guilty, he replied, shrugging. Big deadlines. Long hours. You know how it is. I know enough, I said, stepping closer. To see what this is. He leaned in a little, lowering his voice like we were sharing a secret. What is this, Ethan? I didn't play along. You need to stay away from my wife. He grinned like I'd told a joke. Man, you've got the wrong picture. Laura and I, we're co-workers. Friends. That's all. You don't buy eclairs for friends. Oh, come on. He laughed, loud enough for a few heads to turn. Don't be that guy. It was just sugar and flour. Don't play dumb, I said. You know exactly what you're doing. The late nights. The touching. The attention. Mason took a long breath, then looked me up and down, like he was deciding whether to keep pushing. And of course, he did. I'll tell you something, Ethan, he said, real low now. You can park outside offices, chase down coffee shops, rehearse speeches in your rearview mirror, but if something's already slipping away from you, that's not on me. I stared at him, every muscle in my jaw tight. Stay away from her. He leaned back and laughed. Big, full, theatrical. Like we were in a movie and he was the only one who'd read the script. I'll do whatever I want, he said, smirking as he grabbed his cup from the barista and winked. And then he walked out like nothing happened. I stood there, heart pounding, unsure what I'd expected, but knowing this wasn't it. It wasn't anger I felt. Not just that. It was something worse. That cold clarity when you realize someone's not afraid of consequences, because they think they're already winning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Laura came home around 10. Said work ran late. She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. But Mason's smirk followed me into every room of that house. It was on the mirror when I brushed my teeth. In the silence between our dinner words. In the way she didn't meet my eyes when I asked how her meeting went. And when I finally lay down beside her, the ceiling above us felt lower somehow. Like the house itself knew something I didn't. It was Saturday afternoon when I finally found the nerve to reach out. I'd tracked her down the old-fashioned way, company directory, a little digging, and one quiet message through a neighborhood Facebook group. Rebecca Shaw, Mason's wife. The message I sent her was simple. Hi. I know this is uncomfortable, but I think we need to talk. It's about our spouses. She replied 20 minutes later. You free today? An hour after that, I was standing on her porch. The house was a pale blue colonial just outside Mechanicsburg, tucked between bare trees and winter-tired bushes. She opened the door wearing a thick sweater and an expression that wasn't surprised to see me. Ethan, right? She said, stepping aside to let me in. You're taller than I thought. I followed her into a living room that smelled faintly of cinnamon and something more sterile, like a place that used to be warm but hadn't been in a while. The couch had throw pillows that looked hand-stitched, and a framed photo of a golden retriever sat beside an empty dog bed. I didn't come here to cause problems. I started. Rebecca poured tea from a ceramic pot and handed me a cup like we were old friends. You're not. Sit. We both did. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was waiting. It's Laura, I said finally. My wife. She works with Mason. Lately, things don't feel right. She's never home on time. She gets defensive when I ask simple questions. And he looks at her like, Rebecca sighed, cutting me off gently, like she's already his. I nodded. I've seen it before, she said, setting her cup down. At his last firm, there was a woman named Janine. Then before that, Qley. Same pattern, same energy. He's always got some new reason to stay late, and it always ends in apologies that mean nothing. My throat felt dry. You knew he did this before? I hoped he'd grow out of it, she said, almost to herself. But men like Mason don't grow out of things. They just hide better. She stood and walked over to a small cabinet, pulling out a folder. You should know, we have a prenup. He insisted on it back when we got married. Thought it made him sound like a businessman. But I had my lawyer write in something special. She held up the paper. If I can prove Mason initiated a romantic relationship, or even flirted, in writing or otherwise, I get the business. And this house. I sat up straighter. You're serious? Very, she said. He built the company, but I bankrolled the early years with my inheritance. That clause was the only thing I asked for. My head spun. So you've been waiting. She shook her head. I've been preparing. Rebecca turned to me fully now, her voice even but sharp. If he's doing this again, you're not the only one with something to lose. But you might be the only one who can help me prove it. I met her gaze, the weight of this moment settling over me. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a trap, and the bait was already walking right into it. The hotel lounge was the kind of place where everything shimmered. Polished floors, dim amber lights, conversations floating over soft jazz, and the clink of glasses. Laura said it was just a work thing, networking, drinks, that kind of night. But I hadn't told her I'd be there too. I stood near the back wall, hands in my pockets, the collar of my coat still damp from the rain outside. No name tag, no small talk, just watching. Laura sat near the center of the room, radiant in a black dress I hadn't seen her wear in years. She was laughing, head tilted back, hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the man next to her. Mason. He was in his element, grinning like he was king of the night. One arm draped across the back of the couch, drink in hand, eyes fixed on her like she was his already. Then it happened. He leaned in, whispered something in her ear, and slowly, without hesitation, his hand slid onto her thigh. Just for a second. But enough. My heart didn't race. My jaw didn't clench. I just started walking. Through the crowd, through the buzz of meaningless chatter, until I stood a foot away from them. Mason looked up, surprised to see me, but not rattled. Not yet. Hey, Ethan, he said, like I was somebody he hadn't seen in a while. Didn't know you were invited. I kept my voice steady. Dude, your wife is here. He froze. Laura blinked, pulling her hand from her lap like it had been burned. Wait, what? But before Mason could say a word, another voice cut through the room like cold glass. She is. All heads turned. Rebecca stepped out of the crowd, wearing a dark green coat and the calmest expression I'd ever seen on anyone in a moment like this. Mason's face drained faster than a man hit with a lawsuit. Rebecca, he said, standing awkwardly. I mean, this isn't. She walked up, stopping just short of him. Save it. You know the clause. I saw enough. Becca, wait. Please, he stammered, voice cracking now. You can't do this here. I am doing this here, she said, louder now, and the room went still. This marriage is over, and the prenup will be enforced. His mouth opened, shut, opened again. We can talk about this. Let's just... No, she snapped. You made your choice. In public. So I'll end it in public. Laura stood slowly, eyes wide, looking between us like the floor had vanished. Ethan, what is this? She asked, her voice barely audible. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for once didn't answer. Because tonight wasn't about explanations. It was about truth. And truth, once it surfaces, doesn't wait to be invited in. Mason reached out, trying to touch Rebecca's arm. Please, let's talk privately. She stepped back. You'll hear from my attorney, she said, then turned to me with a quiet nod and walked out like she'd just finished a speech she'd rehearsed 100 times. The ripple she left behind moved through the room slowly, one stunned glance after another. Mason stood frozen in place, lips parted like the words had abandoned him. And me? I walked back to the wall where I'd started, the air around me finally starting to feel like my own again. The rain tapped soft against the windshield as we drove home, headlights carving dull paths through the fog. I didn't speak. Neither did Laura. The car felt like a moving box of silence, padded walls and all. She sat with her body turned slightly toward the window, arms crossed tightly across her chest, like she could physically shield herself from the night that had just unfolded. I kept my hand steady on the wheel. You okay? I asked, eventually. Her eyes didn't leave the glass. You set that up. It wasn't a question. I nodded once, eyes forward. I warned him. She exhaled slowly. And Rebecca? She was already watching, I said. She just needed confirmation. Laura gave a dry, humorless laugh and shook her head. God, you really wanted to humiliate him. No, I said quietly. I just wanted the truth to walk in the same room he was polluting. That landed like a stone in her lap. She didn't pick it up. The rest of the drive stretched out in long red lights and wet roads. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, it's aftermath. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't move right away. She stared straight ahead, her fingers tracing circles on her thigh. You looked calm, she said. I glanced at her. Did I? Like you'd already made up your mind. I thought about that for a moment, then turned off the ignition. No, I said. Just tired of feeling like a stranger in my own life. We stepped into the house. No yelling, no accusations. Just the soft creak of hardwood under our feet and the sound of water dripping from our coats into the entryway rug. Laura went upstairs without another word. I stayed in the kitchen, just standing there, watching the rain trickle down the window above the sink. The night had ended, but the weight of it hadn't moved an inch. And the silence, it wasn't just hers now. It had started settling into me too. The next few days passed like fog on autopilot. We moved around each other carefully, like two people in a house that had already been split by tape down the middle. Laura didn't bring up Mason. Not once. She still made coffee in the morning. Still folded the laundry. Still told me when a package arrived. But her eyes? They never really landed on mine. Like she was rehearsing normal, but not performing it fully. And me? I didn't press. Because sometimes, the silence says more than any conversation ever could. Every action breeds consequence. Mason had learned that the hard way. And now Laura was learning something else. That silence after betrayal doesn't sound like punishment. It sounds like indifference. That might be worse. On Thursday morning, just as I was about to head out, my phone buzzed. Rebecca Shaw. Can we meet again? It's important. That was all it said. No smiley, no follow-up. But the dread hit fast. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering above the reply button. Because whatever this was, it wasn't about Mason anymore. Something new was coming, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. The days that followed Rebecca's message felt like the slow unraveling of a sweater, one thread at a time, quiet but constant. I didn't reply to her right away. I couldn't. Not because I didn't want the truth, but because I already had a feeling what it would be. Meanwhile, back at home, things started to shift in a way that almost felt unnatural. Laura was sweet, overly sweet. She cooked every night. Full meals, not just her usual grilled cheese and salad shortcuts. Roasted chicken with thyme, lemon risotto, apple crumble from scratch. She'd set the table, light a candle, and ask about my day like we were in a commercial for second chances. She'd walk past me in the hallway and brush her fingers along my arm. She laughed louder at my dry jokes. She reached for my hand during TV shows we hadn't watched together in months. One night, she even curled up beside me on the couch, her head resting softly on my shoulder, whispering, "You know I love you, right?" I kissed the top of her head. Yeah, but I didn't feel it. Not because the words weren't true. Maybe they were. Maybe in her own way, she still did. But love, when it's stitched together after tearing, always feels a little too tight in the wrong places. And I couldn't forget the silence. Her silence in the car. Her silence in the days before that lounge. The kind of quiet that's not about shock. It's about choosing not to speak. She was trying now, that much was clear. And maybe, just maybe, a version of me should have been grateful. But the thing that sat in my chest like a lead weight was timing. Why now? Why only after the damage had a name? I'd lie awake most nights, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me, one arm thrown across my chest like it was hers to hold. And I'd wonder if she even remembered the look in her eyes when she was sitting next to Mason, leaning in just a little too close, laughing a little too long. I'd wonder if the guilt had finally caught up to her, or if this was just her survival kicking in, patching holes in a boat she hadn't even planned to return to. Wednesday night, she made roast beef and mashed potatoes. My favorite. She poured us both wine, asked me how work was going, and even suggested we plan a weekend trip somewhere, just the two of us. "We haven't been to the Poconos in years," she said with a hopeful smile. I smiled back, but I couldn't stop thinking about Rebecca. Her message still sat in my phone, unopened again after I'd read it the first time. I hadn't responded, and she hadn't followed up. That worried me more than if she had. Because people don't stay silent when something isn't serious. They go quiet when they know what they're about to say will change everything. And here Laura was, humming softly in the kitchen, wearing the apron I bought her 6 Christmases ago like it meant something again. Stirring sauce, setting napkins, checking the oven timer like she had all the time in the world. "Dessert too," she said over her shoulder. "Thought you might want something sweet after this week." I wanted to say something. Ask her what she was really doing. Ask her what it meant to come back to someone only after you'd nearly left them without saying it aloud. But instead, I just nodded. Because when you already feel the ground shifting beneath you, you learn to stand still. For now, still here? Give this video a like, it really helps. The River Cafe sat low and quiet on the edge of town. One of those places with mismatched chairs and old jazz humming through a wall speaker. It was late afternoon. Cloudy, cold. The kind of gray that settles into your skin and stays there. Rebecca was already seated when I arrived. She didn't smile when she saw me, just gave a small nod and gestured to the chair across from her. No coffee, no wine, just her phone on the table, face down, like a loaded card she hadn't decided when to play. I sat down without a word. Let the silence settle first. It felt familiar now. She tapped her nails on the wood grain for a moment, then flipped her phone over and unlocked it with a swipe. "You sure you want to see this?" I didn't answer right away, but I nodded. She tapped, scrolled once, then turned the screen toward me. It was all there. Blue and gray chat bubbles, time-stamped over weeks. Mason's name at the top. "Mason, you looked incredible today. That dress should be illegal." Laura, "Haha, stop. You'll get me in trouble." Mason, "Only if your husband pays as much attention as I do." Laura, "He doesn't." That one hit like a punch. I tried to keep my face still, but I could feel my breath shifting. My heart slowed, not from shock, but from recognition. Mason, "Sometimes I think you're already mine." Laura, "Sometimes. I think about it too." I set the phone down gently, face up, screen still glowing with words I couldn't unread. "I don't need to see more," I said. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. I waited, she said, hoping they'd stop, hoping maybe she'd pull away. She didn't, I said, more to myself than to her. She studied me for a long beat. "You okay?" I shook my head. "Not really." The cafe around us kept moving, mugs clinking, spoons stirring, faint murmurs of people living in different worlds than ours. "I knew it was happening," I said. "Not officially, not confirmed, but I felt it. You always feel it before it breaks." Rebecca lowered her voice. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. I really was." I glanced up at her. "You think they?" She raised an eyebrow. "Don't need to. What matters is what they gave each other. Attention, emotion, escape." I looked out the window, the gray river sliding by like time itself. This is what I feared most, I said quietly. Not just that it happened, but that I couldn't stop it. Rebecca's tone was soft now. Not kind, just real. What's the point of stopping it if she already left you in her heart? I didn't speak. I just nodded. Because some truths don't need responses. They just echo. And they stay. We sat there a while longer, the silence between us heavy but honest. Then I stood, thanked her quietly, and walked out without touching the phone again. I already knew every word by heart. It was just after 9 when I got home. The living room glowed with the soft flicker of the TV. Laura sat curled into the corner of the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, legs tucked under her. On the screen, some show played where people were laughing, fake, too loud, completely unaware that the air in the room had just changed. She glanced over when she heard the door click. "Hey," she said lightly. "You're home early." I didn't answer. I hung my coat by the door, walked in slowly, and stopped just behind the couch. She muted the TV with the remote, twisting around. "Everything okay?" I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked, "How does one destroy 2 marriages at once?" The color drained from her face instantly. "What?" she breathed. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb moved deliberately across the screen before I turned it toward her. The chat log glared under the lamplight. Her words. Mason's responses. Line after line. She didn't take the phone. Didn't move. Her eyes just locked on the screen as her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something but forgot how to form words. I set the phone down on the coffee table between us and sat in the chair across from her. The table felt like a courtroom bench. "You wrote those?" I said calmly. Laura blinked, shoulders trembling. "Ethan." I held up a hand. "No excuses. No stories. I'm not here for spin." She swallowed hard, then tried again. "I didn't mean for it to become real." I interrupted. "You didn't mean for your feelings to drift into someone else's inbox? You didn't mean to send hearts at midnight and laugh at things you never laugh at with me?" She looked down. "It didn't go that far." "It went far enough," I said, voice steady, like I was giving a weather report. "You didn't just betray me. You gave him pieces of you I didn't even know were up for grabs." "I wasn't. I didn't sleep with him," she whispered, as if that might buy her points. "That's not what I asked," I said. "I asked why you'd tell me you love me when you'd already chosen someone else." Laura flinched. Her mouth opened, shut, then opened again, still no words. I leaned forward, forearms on my knees, and stared at her. "You sat across from me every night. Said you were just tired. Said you loved me. Cooked dinner. Wore that apron I bought. All while you were texting him that I don't pay attention." Tears started gathering in her eyes. "I didn't know what I was doing," she said. "You knew exactly what you were doing." I replied, my voice flat. She pressed a hand to her chest. "It was never serious. I felt lonely, Ethan. And Mason was there, and he gave you attention." "I know." She looked up at me, helpless. "I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. "So am I." For a long while, neither of us spoke. The TV screen changed to the end credits of a show neither of us had watched. In the background, the canned laughter echoed over the silence like it belonged to a different life. Finally, I stood. "I'm sleeping in the guest room," I said quietly. "Don't come in." Her voice cracked as I turned to leave. "Ethan, please, don't let this end us." But I didn't answer, because she'd already ended us. She just hadn't been honest enough to say it out loud. The courthouse smelled like dust and something older, like papers no one wanted to touch. I stood at the clerk's window, divorce packet in hand, the forms printed neatly, filled out down to the last checkbox. It had taken me longer than I'd admit to sign the final page. Not because I was unsure, but because part of me had needed to mourn what I thought this marriage had been. Laura stood a few feet behind me in the hallway. She hadn't said a word since we walked in. Her heels echoed once or twice on the tile, a sound that used to mean home to me. Now it just felt like an afterthought. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and red-rimmed glasses, took the papers and nodded without much emotion. "You'll get confirmation in the mail," she said. "Standard processing time's about 4 weeks." "Thank you," I said. When I turned around, Laura looked like she hadn't breathed in minutes. Her eyes were wide, glossy. Her coat hung loose around her shoulders like she hadn't been able to dress properly this morning. Her mascara was clinging to the edges of her lashes like it didn't want to be there either. Her voice came out in a whisper. Ethan, is this really it? I didn't answer right away. She took a step forward. I know what I did was wrong. I know I broke something in you. But can't we just try again? I looked at her then. Really looked. The woman standing in front of me was not the one from 12 years ago, who danced in our kitchen barefoot with pizza sauce on her cheek, who used to leave notes in my lunch bag just to say she missed me. This Laura was someone who had lived two lives for too long, and had finally been caught between them. I don't hate you, I said softly. She blinked, stunned by the gentleness of it. But I can't give myself back to someone who treated my love like a backup plan. Tears broke. She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking. I never stopped loving you, she choked out. I believe that, I said. But love without truth? That's not love I can trust. She reached for my arm. We can go to counseling. We can. Ethan, please. Don't throw us away. I stepped back, not out of spite, but out of the final boundary I still owed myself. I'd rather be alone, I said, steady now, than stay with someone who made me feel invisible just to feel wanted. Her hand dropped to her side like it had lost its strength. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't wait. I walked past the benches, past the bulletin boards, out through the glass doors where the winter air hit my face like something I'd been holding off for too long. And for the first time in months, I breathed. The house was quiet again. Not tense, not waiting, just quiet. It had been a week since the courthouse. The air inside felt different now, still heavy in corners, sure, but lighter where it mattered. Like something had been drained out of the walls that didn't belong there anymore. I stood in the hallway, staring at the one photo I hadn't taken down. It was framed in blackwood, just above the light switch near the entryway. Our wedding photo. We were both smiling in it. Laura's head tilted back laughing, my hand wrapped gently around her waist. I remembered the moment exactly. Someone had said something ridiculous right before the shutter clicked, and we both lost it. That laughter, back then, was real. But what haunted me now wasn't what was in the picture. It was what came after. I reached up and lifted the frame slowly, careful not to let the nail scrape the wall. I held it for a moment, studying the faces, mine, trusting and open, hers, lit up like the world had finally landed where it belonged. Then I walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet under the sink, and gently placed it in the trash. No ceremony, no speech, just release. As I stood back up, I exhaled without meaning to, deep and long, like something inside me had just settled. What's hidden always surfaces, I whispered to no one. And it was true. The quiet doubts, the gut instincts, the strange absences. They had all been there like roots pushing under concrete, waiting to crack things open. But now the ground was clear. There were no lies left to uncover, no messages to discover, no confrontations to prepare for, no pretending that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't as bad as it looked. I was alone in the house, but I wasn't lonely. Not this time. I poured myself a glass of water and walked over to the back door. The early spring air slid in through the screen, cool and honest. Out on the porch, the wind rustled the trees just enough to remind me that time moves whether we want it to or not. Life doesn't pause for heartbreak. It just waits for you to catch up. I sat down in the old wooden chair Laura used to hate, the one she said squeaked too much. It still squeaked. But tonight, it sounded like freedom. And for the first time in a long while, I let the silence sit with me, not as a warning, but as a friend. Because everything that needed to fall had fallen, and I was still standing. That was the end of the story. I still think about the moment Rebecca chose to walk into that room and end her marriage in public instead of protecting Mason in private.